Welcome to New Song. Come sing a new song with us.
A reading from Psalm 34. I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. My soul makes it boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad. O magnify the Lord with me, and let us exalt his name together. I sought the Lord, and he answered me, and delivered me from all my fears. Look to him and be radiant, so your faces shall never be ashamed. This poor soul cried and was heard by the Lord, and was saved from every trouble. The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him and delivers them. O taste and see that the Lord is good. Happy are those who take refuge in him. Word of God, word of life.
Let us stand for the gospel.
The Holy Gospel according to Mark chapter 10. They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, Son of David, have mercy on me. Jesus stood still and said, Call him here. And they called the blind man, saying to him, Take heart, get up, he is calling you. So throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, What do you want me to do for you? The blind man said to him, My teacher, let me see again. Jesus said to him, Go, your faith has made you well. Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. Word of God, word of life.
Thanks be to God. Morning, church. How's everybody this morning? Let's give God a bit. It's great to see so many people in church, and we added more chairs, and now there's still more people. So give thanks to God for all of you that showed up this morning. It reminds me of when they tried to expand highways in LA, thinking that would alleviate traffic. I don't know how that worked out. Did that work out? No. It just expands. So we're continuing a new sermon series called I See You. And along with that, we have a companion art project each Sunday. So I invite you after worship to go and to visit some of our artwork in the community room. Today we have textile art, and there's just some really gorgeous pieces of quilting. So please check that out after the service. The other day I didn't feel like cooking. Do you ever get to that mood that you don't feel like cooking? I know some of you don't feel like cooking 7 nights a week because I see you out in the restaurants all the time. But I have to feed my kid, so I called up Miles and asked him what he wanted to eat, and he was in the mood for canes. Have you ever been Raising Cane's? So I drove over to Stephanie, which is nearby where I live, and to my shock, the line at Cane's was insane. It was not just one loop of cars, but there begun a second loop of cars waiting in line to go through the drive-through at Cane's. And there were well over 30 cars waiting in line. They probably would wait there for an hour to get to order their food. And so I called up Miles, and I was kind of stuck because I didn't have anything to cook at home. And I'm sorry, Miles, I'm not going to wait in line for an hour. I'm not a line guy. So then something weird happened. I pulled over to park to talk to Miles, and then I saw somebody walk out of the building. And they had bags of food in their hands. And I thought, what's going on? So then I was just kind of curious, and then I walked to the store and walked through the doors, and takeout was available, and there was not a single person in the store going for takeout. Everybody was waiting in line in their cars, emitting CO2 into the atmosphere, waiting probably for an hour to get their food when they could have had it in 2 minutes, just completely oblivious to what they could not see that was right in front of them. It just blew my mind. This month we're looking at what it means to see and to not see, and trying to train ourselves to be able to see in different ways and to see people in different ways. The theme of sight recognition, how to see, there's all different kinds of eyesight. We think of traditionally sight as eyesight, right? Seeing with our eyes. But there are other types of, there is hindsight, right? If you are the management for the Green Bay Packers, for example, and you decide that you are going to pick a quarterback in the first round of the draft when you have the best quarterback in the history of football, hindsight says that probably wasn't a good idea. For those of you that don't know, I'm about to lose our beloved Aaron Rodgers is going to leave the Packers because they didn't. Anyway, moving on. I'm not supposed to use sermon as therapy, so I got to remind myself. So, the opposite of hindsight is foresight, which is not necessarily the ability to predict the future, but to plan for it, to see what might happen. For example, if I had the foresight to know that the doctor was going to put a cast on my foot, I never would have gone into the stupid doctor's office in the first place. A more important, and then there's, we can be farsighted, nearsighted. The other day, I was with a couple years ago, I was with a friend, and I was making fun of them for having reading glasses. You know, they had gotten to the age where they had to use reading glasses for everything. And then I kind of took the glasses and put them on, and I went, oh my goodness, I need reading glasses. There's short-sightedness, right? Short-sightedness is to just kind of inability to see beyond the gratification of the now versus sacrificing a little bit for a better tomorrow, just to not be able to really see the fullness of things. And short-sightedness can be a real problem. There's insight, right? Insight, to be able to apprehend the inner nature of things, to see intuitively, insight to see things as they truly are beyond the surface, beyond the superficial nature of things, to see the whys and the hows of things, to recognize. As we explore ICU, developed again by the Methodists of New Jersey, this sermon series, so just giving a shout out to my New Jersey Methodist friends, thank you for their sermon series. We're going to try to stretch our ability to see beyond our normal sight, but with 4 biblical stories at how God works beyond the limitations of conventional wisdom and beyond often the short-sightedness of people. In today's story, we get blind Bartimaeus. Jesus healed a number of blind people throughout the scriptures. Probably one of the most famous one is the man born blind. And just to recall, the disciples were walking by and they encountered a man who was born blind. And the disciples' first question was what? Who sinned that this man was born blind? Who's to blame for his not fitting the norm of everybody else? And how did Jesus respond? He said, this man, nobody sinned. This man was born blind so that God's works could be glorified through him. And by the end of the story, he's praising God wherever he goes. So what we understand about that, to be blind in the scriptures and often in other places, puts a burden on you a lot of times in part because of the culture around you. Today we see this poor blind man forced to beg on the side of the road. No doubt he probably practiced this each and every day. He woke up in the morning, got his tools together, his garment to lay out on the ground, and went about his business of begging for his daily food that day and next day and the next day and the next day. If you've done any traveling around the world, you've no doubt come across people who have been in such dire straits in their lives and in desperate need of food all around the world, locally. And what happens often is people begin to stop seeing the man. I imagine probably the man had become kind of a nuisance to the townsfolk of Jericho, because right when Jesus comes along and begins to walk by, what has happened is they'd come to Jericho, which is considered the oldest city in the world, and a place that some of us that traveled to the Holy Land got to actually visit Jericho. They come to Jericho, and they're on their way to Jerusalem, and by the time they begin to leave Jericho, a huge crowd of followers had begun to be with Jesus. We can understand this crowd to kind of be like a church, right? You got a crowd of followers of Jesus. What do we call that today? Call it a church. right? So here they are, beginning to follow Jesus as he goes to Jerusalem. Large crowd, his core disciples, plus many, many, many others. And the moment the man understands that Jesus is near, he cries out, "Son of David, have mercy on me." That's his request, have mercy on me. And what does the church do? They try to shut him up. They try to silence him immediately. Shush! Be quiet, Bartimaeus! Shut up! Why? They're kind of like the people waiting in line at Cain's, right? Oblivious to this other pathway, and quickly they go into lockdown mode. They try to shut him down, and they try to put a buffer between Jesus and Bartimaeus. They want to build a wall so that Bartimaeus cannot have access to Jesus. And so often the church can do that. I've been interested in a particular church that's been in the news lately, and there are sometimes that churches can build buffers around the pastor. I know of a church I remember long ago in San Francisco, I think, and the pastor had bodyguards to protect him. Not when he was out in the world, not when he was like going through the security or whatever. He had bodyguards in his church. He had bodyguards to protect himself from the flock. Another church has a VIP section. So in that church, people like to sit in the front row. They're not Lutherans, so they love to sit in the front row. And they had the section cordoned off for VIP, famous athletes and celebrities. They had a green room, and the pastor had his, you know what a rider is? It's a list of like green M&Ms and all the things that you want before and after the service, and they would have a party in the green room for all the VIPs. Meanwhile, the people were really there to kind of fund the lavish lifestyle of the pastor and his friends, right? In other ways, we can create a wall that can prohibit people from encountering Christ as well. Sometimes that can just be neglecting to say hello to somebody, right? On the contrast, there are opportunities to be Christ for a neighbor as well. Time and again, the disciples, symbols of the church, try to keep the marginalized people away. Remember when some people brought little children to Jesus, right? And what did the disciples do? Their first instinct was to do what? Push them away. And Jesus says, of course, let the children come. You see, it is that Bartimaeus and Jesus are not going to allow those buffers and those walls obstruct the will of God, to obstruct the mission of mercy to happen. And so Bartimaeus, blind, has the true insight of the power of Jesus. He cries out even louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." He's not going to let their voices stop him from the chance to meet Jesus. And he cries even louder, so much that Jesus can finally hear him. He's the very first person in the Gospel of Mark to use the word Son of David to call Jesus. What does that mean? He is the first person to identify clearly that Jesus is the heir to become a new king, a king that brings healing, mercy, and love into the world. Bartimaeus could see that because he had insight. Jesus calls him in. Come. And now the church does something amazing. I imagine with a large crowd, it's kind of a diverse group, so there were some that wanted to push away anybody that was different, to push away those that were kind of a nuisance and a hassle. But immediately when Jesus says, "Come to me," others in the church spring into action. And they grab the man and they say, "There's good news. Jesus wants to see you. Come with me." And they become ambassadors and they become messengers and helpers to bring this man to Jesus. And they come together and they have this amazing conversation together. How often can we find ourselves waiting in line at Cain's in a long line just because that's the way everyone else has done it. Sometimes we just do it by following the herd. Sometimes we do it because we don't want to get out of the car. It's work to get out of the car, right? It takes effort. Why is there a knee-jerk reaction sometimes to silence voices on the margins, especially voices that are not trying to harm you, but just to elevate their own voice to be heard? To be heard. To be clear, when people want to be heard that are on the margins, they're not a threat to those who live in the center. They're not. So Jesus brings him close, and they come. Apparently, as they gather together, Jesus does something extraordinary. And I don't know a lot of times when he does this, but he says to the man, "What would you like me to do for you? What would you like me to do for you?" So often when we can be in the center and we think we know everything, how many of us are good at telling other people what they should do? Yeah? Yeah? Very good. You know what's best for everybody else, especially people that have nothing in common with you. You have great ideas for them. How many of you think you know what's best for poor people, that you know what they should be doing? Apparently you know better than Jesus. Because Jesus says, "What would you like me to do for you?" I don't know. Tell me. And he says, "Teacher, I want to see again." We discovered that this was not a man born blind, but that at one time he could see, and now he can't, and now he has to beg, and he says, "I would like to see again." And Jesus sees him, and he sees Jesus. He sees with his heart, and his mind, and his soul. And he says, "Go, your faith has made you well." But he doesn't go. He joins the crowd. He joins the followers of Jesus on their way to Jerusalem. What a blessing it is to get out of our car. What a blessing it is to get out of the line, walk through the gate, through the door, and to see abundance, not of fried chicken, but of God's grace when we open our eyes to see our neighbor. Some of us are going to begin seeing neighbors this week. How many of you have volunteered to bring food to people with our Golden Groceries programs, to be a driver for food? Could you stand up for a second? Just take a second. Stand up. It's okay. See, there's a whole bunch of you. Very good. Thank you. You guys are going to have a chance to bring food, which is needed, and they've said we need food. But you also have the chance to imagine Jesus and Bartimaeus and to see the humanity of your neighbor and to bring a smile, to bring a welcome, and to listen. How are you today? And so that is practicing to being able to see. After church, I invite you to go to the community room because we can practice seeing our neighbor right here at New Song Church too, right? I know it's so hard to be able to see the fullness of ourselves with the masks on, right? I can't tell if Brad is scowling at me right now or smiling at me. I can tell you're smiling now because you, right? But isn't that true? It's really hard to connect with one another because of these masks because we can only see our eyes. But it can be those very eyes and that very moment when you feel you're a part of something because somebody welcomed me that can make a huge difference in the church. And so we practice to see one another by going into the community room after church and to see beyond the surface of our quilters and to see, oh, wow, I had no idea that Sheila made some really funky quilts when she was 17 years old. I had no idea that all the different talents within the church. So when you go into the community room, I invite you to get out of the drive-through line and to go see the wonderful talents that exist in our congregation. And then you can make a connection, say, well, if these people have talents, then maybe each one of us does as well. And so that together we can discover the blessings of I See You. Amen.